social construct. So basically the social constructivist theory, underpinning that is the notion that we learn best in certain circumstances, especially those which are positive learning environments, positive social settings. So when we're in a group, we learn better than if we're on our own and left to our own devices. So we also have there, sorry, let me just minimize that. We also have there that we learn best when we are in a zone of learning, which takes us beyond our comfort zone, but not to the max of our sort of panic zone. So if we look there at the graphic, we've got the learner can do tasks, the learner can do tasks with some assistance, and the learner cannot do tasks. So in this area where the learner can do tasks with assistance, this is where we get the knowledgeable other. So this is often thought to be, okay, yes, the teacher is the knowledgeable other. However, if we combine the theories of social constructivism and collaborative and cooperative learning, we can use learners to be knowledgeable others as well. And indeed, I believe they are. And actually kind of linking back to Noreen's presentation just then, texts and computers, they can also be knowledgeable others, which we'll touch on in a little while. And not directly linked to this theory, but just general best practice is that learning goals should be smart. And this is how learners will best learn, if they know what they're expected to do, and if it's something that is achievable for them. Again, linking back to the theory of the task being something that learners find manageable. So what does or can that look like in the classroom? Basically, lots of interaction. There might be some challenges in the beginning if your learners aren't necessarily used to this kind of interactive, collaborative way of learning. I use interactive not to relate to technology, but to relate to human interaction. So it can be a bit daunting to learn to do something new when you're not used to something. It's always, say, a little bit challenging to start with. Learners are taking active roles. Oftentimes, learners are used to taking a passive role where they are spoon-fed, or where they are told exactly what to do, or where they have very finite kind of rules, which they're supposed to kind of carry out in this case, in the learning classroom, sorry, in the collaborative and cooperative classroom, the learner is going to have to take an active role and become a participant, not a recipient. I think that's the crux of the matter, is that we want active engagement. So what this also means is that the teacher, i.e. us, we need to manage it. So it's no good just saying, right, work in groups. It needs to be managed. There are lots of different ways that we can do this, and many theories out there which you could try and emulate in your class. It requires a lot of organisation and definitely boundaries. So especially if you're working with younger learners, or if you're working with not in a higher education setting, it will require some boundary setting on your part. So I'm going to move into the section now where I give you some ideas of how to make your different activities, i.e. your vocab, your pronunciation, your grammar activities, more cooperative and collaborative, getting the students to actually use the language. So an example of a pronunciation activity, how you could make that less teacher-led and more cooperative. Get the students to read a text. It could be a small section, a small paragraph, or it could be a series of sentences, depending on the level of your learners. It can work from right, sort of entry level, right to the top. And what you do, you have the students in partners read aloud the sentence or the paragraph, and then the listener, the partner who is listening to the reader, circles any words which the speaker struggles with. So obviously this one needs to be sort of presented in an empathetic way. So you obviously don't want someone circling everything. And you might ask, well, how do they know if it's not pronounced properly? Well, they might not know how it's pronounced properly, but they would be able to identify if someone struggled with it. So the pronunciation, if they stumbled, or if they had a hurdle. And what you do with that data, you elicit, okay, were there any words? Okay, which line? All right, let's have a little go at practicing how we say that. Another way, which actually you can apply the next strategy to multiple activities, is to have students to play the tutor role. For example, you might have a vocab list. It might have the target language that you're working on at that particular time, and the definitions. And then one of the students in the partners has the list, one of the students doesn't, and they quiz each other. If you can access their first language, if you have any understanding of this, then it could also be simply, sort of a translation activity. But the idea is that rather than you being the only person, you can have mini tutors around the classroom. Moving on to sentence builders. So sentence builders, it's nothing new to use a sentence builder. But the way that I've incorporated it into my classes makes it, again, using the students as teachers, it makes it more productive in terms of language use for everyone. So how I would do this is I would have partners A and B. A would be facing the board, B would be away from the board. They all have a little sentence builder with the target language. So it might be like, I play, or I like playing football, I like listening to music. We'll have our little sentence builder on the screen, and I might want them to say, I like listening to music. So I would just say the word music, and I would underline on the board the parts of that sentence that I want the partner Bs to say. And what happens here is that partner A, they're looking at the board. Partner B, they've got their little sheets with the sentence builders, but partner A's can check if partner B's are actually saying the sentence as I have it on the board. So by doing this, you've got everyone's engaged and target language is really high. One of my favorite ways to get everyone involved and to kind of minimize the teacher presence in the classroom and to take on more of a facilitator role is to have mini classrooms. So this is where we have different concepts being, say, in different areas of the classroom. We might have 3 different aspects of a grammar topic that you're teaching. For example, you might be teaching present simple. Well, of course, we need to teach present simple, positive statements, negative statements, and questions. So you can have, and this is where the knowledgeable other besides the teacher comes into play, you can have within the classroom, say, 3 different sheets which explain to the learners what to do with present simple in negative forms, in question forms, and so on. So whilst so you divide them into groups and you put them into the different mini classrooms. And then what happens once you're satisfied from your monitoring, from your questioning, that they've grasped the concepts at their particular stations, you regroup them and then they share their information, they share the concept. What happens here is that learners, they're embedding their knowledge. So when they've read their information sheets, or you could also prepare a video ahead of time and have them watching videos if you have that technology available. They then regroup and they're sharing knowledge. So they become the knowledgeable others. And not only that, but it embeds the knowledge that they have just read. So obviously we learn best by teaching, kind of thing. So moving on to receptive skills, how can you make your receptive skills activities boost target language use? Well, I'm sure many of us, if not all of us, have heard of and used Jigsaw, which is kind of related to the previous concept sharing idea. So jigsaws, where you have different text or different parts of a text, for example, like this. In this case, this is taken from the British Council Learn English website. It loans itself very well to a jigsaw reading, where you've got 4 clear different parts. You can give the students the text in chunks. Again, they go off in groups, they're reading one part and they regroup and try and gather information, share information. Again, lots of cooperative and collaborative work here, and learner taking the role of active participant. They also have dictation and variations on that theme. So where your partner A would read a text and tell partner B, who would then listen and write down what they hear. So we're getting all the skills in here, actually. For your higher level learners, you might do tasks that involve summary and reconstruction. This can actually loan itself very well in the context of translanguaging, as is obviously the theme of this conference. You could use, if you have L1 alongside target language, and you can access both, you could do this as a sort of translation activity. You can also just do it monolingually. So A and B both have texts, and they share the key points from the text, and their partners have to reconstruct it. It might also, if you're doing it with language one, you might also just use keywords from the text rather than explaining it. Okay, so another one which works really well. It's kind of something with younger learners, but I have used it with more more adult learners, and it's called The Last Word. So students, they have their reading text, and they're in small groups, and they take 3 to 4 turns to read a set number of words in a text. So a very, very simple example. Let's say we're in a group now. We have to each read 3 words of a particular paragraph. So I would read summary and reconstruction. The next person would read A and B texts. Students, and the next person would read share key points until we get to the last word. So obviously a criticism of this might be, well, it's going to result in uneven intonation. But the key point here is not intonation. The key point here is collaboration and sticking on task. Reading and being part of the group. Some other ones here linking to listening. Excuse me, but I'm fighting a chest infection. Another one here. Listen and read tasks. So the teacher can read aloud a text and replace the word with the name of a student. So that student would then have to read the missing word. Alternatively, for increased learner use of target language, the students can all read, and the teacher would say a magic word, and then the students would have to change and pick up. And this just ensures that students are actually listening to each other and not drifting off when you get someone to read aloud in class, which from my opinion, from my view, it has its benefits and its drawbacks. Again, it just needs management. And I think this is a way that it can be managed to ensure that everyone is reading and is focused on the task at hand. Again, promoting peer listening. Students can create their sentences on a theme or an aspect of language. What happens next? The teacher goes around and checks that the sentences are accurate. Then have ahead of you some number cards, 1 to 5, 1 to 10. And then we're going to do a whole class listening. And the audio is actually going to be the sentences that students have created. So by doing this, it means that we're sharing the classroom. It's not just us as the teacher, selecting the material. It's actually the learners who are creating the material with your guidance and with your support to make sure that it's an accurate model of language. But the learners are becoming the audio. So a high level of participation from the students. And whilst a student is reading out their sentence, the others are listening for whatever your topic might be. I've done it recently with on the theme of hobbies and time phrases. So they might first be listening to each other to find out, okay, what hobby does she like doing? And then they would all write down what hobby Fatima does, for example. And then another listening activity here. So if you have got an audio from your course book, perhaps get the transcript, and you can either do it on a word level or you can do it on a phrase or sentence level, and have two separate sets, one with what the actual transcript has and one with some tweaks. So I would then print these out onto paper in little boxes, and have the students look over them to start with in pairs and groups. I have tried both and it does work. Have them look over it, make sure that they're not just looking at it as they listen. And then when you play the listening, they will work together to make two lists, what they hear and what they don't hear. And it's important also to make sure that they're not talking during this activity, but allow time for them to discuss between the first time that you play it and the second time that you play it. And then they're going to listen again, and to make sure that they've got the categories as you've defined them. It also works with true and false, and it also works with mentioned, not mentioned, and true, false, not mentioned. Okay, so moving on now to writing activities. Writing activities need not be silent either. I think a crucial part of any written task is the brainstorming. Actually, most of the problems with a writing task can be traced back to a lack of brainstorming, a lack of planning. It's really important that students have ideas and are not just let loose to just write. So definitely in the brainstorm and planning stages, I would encourage this to be done in groups. It could be done in whole class setting, but then the problem is that it can be a little bit more teacher-led. You might want to model it, say, the first time, but then I would encourage the learners to become their own, sort of to lead each other and brainstorm using a template or a model that you have. With creation, again, writing, it doesn't have to be a solitary or a silent activity. It can be a shared task. And this is a way in which you will increase naturally the target language. With feedback, you can encourage learners to feedback verbally on each other's work. So thinking about, okay, what's good about your piece of writing? What did I like about your piece of writing? And then what could you do better next time? So actually engaging and then that's ticking a lot of boxes that we want to tick as teachers. They're self and peer assessing, they've increased their use of target language, and they're feeding back. They're engaging with their own writing and each other's writing. Obviously, with enhancing speaking, they're already speaking, but we really need to make sure that we give students the tools to participate in speaking activities to their best abilities. So one thing I've noticed is a lack of sort of that communication, the little things that we need in partner and group work activities. So it might be simple things like, oh, is it me? Instead of saying, Anna, like they, teach them to say, oh, is it me? Teach them these little phrases. And that way it'll encourage a culture of using English in the classroom. And that links to game vocab. So obviously learners of all ages like games, depending on how you sell it and how gamified your activities are. So teach them game vocab. It's your turn. It's my turn. I win, you lose. These phrases kind of come naturally. They don't necessarily come naturally, especially if you're a learner of English and your goal of the game is to use present continuous activities. Yeah, so increasing the use of target language through genuine interaction, and also teaching phrases for clarification. What did you mean by that? Oh, is that like, so teaching learners the language between the content, basically, and making sure that you have those scaffolds there. So I'm talking things like having printouts, let the students always have them available, have them around the room. If you have your own room and you can do that, have them around the room. If not, make sure that students have on the whiteboard and or in their books as well, in their notebooks, they can have a copy themselves. And underpinning all of this really is reward effort and not only accuracy. So if they've tried and they've made some mistakes, some errors, at least they've tried, and reward that. Now it's about time to finish up. So does anyone have any questions or comments about what I've shared with you today? If anything wasn't clear or you'd like further clarification or something, then let me know. And where do you think we'll be going next from this? Like how will you implement any of these ideas in your classroom?